So let me just give a brief introduction of the three of them. So Kip Walk at Blommer, he's a second-generation cocoa and chocolate industry veteran. He's the person who created the Sustainable Origins program at Blommer and has been the champion within the company and within the industry, really, for sustainability, major partner for Rainforest Alliance in working in a variety of different origins. And you're the biggest manufacturer and producer in the, manufacturer in the United States. So he's the company behind the brands, right? Which is the type of company that is really critical in helping us meet our sustainability goals, because they're the ones who really have to go figure out how to make it work. Right? We also have with us Gilbert Gatali, who came in from Rwanda to be with us today. So he's come a long ways, and we really appreciate it. We're making him work. Last night he did an event for us at Rainforest Alliance and met with a number of our supporters to talk to him about what he's doing. At KZ Noir, he is the managing director, and the company is quite significant in Rwanda. It owns three private companies, and they work with about 15,000 farmers and sell into Starbucks and Stumptown and others. And they were the first, one of their coffee lines was the first to get Rainforest Alliance certification in Rwanda back in 2013. And Gilbert is very active in talking about these issues and engaging people around sustainability. And then Christine Riley-Miller, who's the Senior Director for Corporate Social Responsibility and the Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin-Robbins Community Foundation. She has 20 years of experience in sustainability and nonprofit engagement, community relations, et cetera, and is very active on the corporate social responsibility side for Dunkin' Donuts, who's been working with us for more than 5 years in a variety of different countries, such as Colombia and Ethiopia, Guatemala, around sourcing sustainable tea and coffee. And just this year, I don't know if you've seen, but the Rainforest Alliance frog is now on Dunkin' Donuts signs and everywhere. It's very exciting to see. And Christine also was recently named one of 12 White House Champions of Change, which is very exciting for her work leveraging her experience as an AmeriCorps member. So, we have business people here, but business people who have walked a path that's a little bit different, right? And really looking forward to learning from them today. So, without further ado, let me turn this over to Kip and ask him to tell us a little bit about how, having a robust sustainability strategy means investing in long-term impact, right? And how does this impact the company on the short term?
It's a good question. Thank you, Tensie, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. As Tensie mentioned, Blommer is the company behind the brands. You will not see a bar like you have there today out on the shelf, but you have eaten our chocolate through many other companies. When you think of chocolate, you also got to keep in mind all those companies that are using chocolate chips in their cookies or in their cakes, ice cream companies, all of those, and even a lot of the chocolate brands are actually sourcing chocolate as an ingredient. So Blommer is the company that transfers that cocoa bean into the products that are needed. We developed our modern sustainability strategy about 15 years ago, and quite honestly, in the cocoa sector, sustainability wasn't even a word that came up with any of our customers. I remember going to one customer and said, I've got a fully traceable supply chain. And this was about 2004. And the buyers looked at me and said, well, that's pretty interesting. What else have you got? Today, traceability is the key focus of many of the companies within cocoa. So for us, investing on the ground with our farmer partners was something that we saw as needed because of the challenges the farm base faces. We've got farmers that 90% of the cocoa grown globally are on family farms of about 4 acres in size. Those are truly subsistence farmers. There's no running water, there's no electricity, schools are not very common, and neither is medical care. So we understood that in order for cocoa to continue to thrive, we needed to make sure that the business model for cocoa growing and cocoa farming was improved. So we started investing with the farmers and with Rainforest Alliance to start to build up that business model, improve it, and therefore ensure, or at least hope, that the next generation of farmers see the value of staying with cocoa. Commercially, it was a risky proposition. We saw the need from a supply chain basis. Our customers didn't see at the time the need for a sustainable product. So it was an investment that we made. It is one that we continue to make, and it's now kind of rewarding to see that the industry is now all kind of coming in line, and the industry at large is working towards a sustainable product.
Thank you, Kip. And Kip is actually also active with Cocoa Action, that's doing a lot of work as an industry around these issues as well, World Cocoa Foundation. Gilbert, please talk to us a bit about what the daily challenges are from an environmental, social, economic point of view that Rwandan coffee producers face, and how you're working to help them with that.
Thanks. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be with you this morning. I feel like the answer I'm going to give you is very similar to what you just said about cocoa farmers, which makes it really interesting to just see what the world of a smallholder farmer is like all across. When I talk to farmers, when I go to Nicaragua or in Kigali, or when farmers come out, or when we go to the washing stations that we operate in, it's very similar all across. But specifically for smallholder farmers in Rwanda, challenges are numerous. The first challenge is how to increase yield per tree. Productivity has not been increasing. If anything, it's probably been decreasing. So that becomes a challenge. The world coffee market prices are constantly changing. So as a farmer, to not know how much you're going to make from your coffee on a daily basis is a major challenge. And it's like having a paycheck that you have to every month go to the bank and see, am I going to make what I made last month? Is it going to be more? Is it going to be less? So you're constantly unaware of what your paycheck is going to be. That's a big challenge that farmers are faced with. And then the other social, environmental issues that farmers that we work with have, wastewater, no running water, electricity, schools, being able to harvest your coffee and have the infrastructure to get your coffee to a place where you can actually sell it and make money from it. Lack of financing so that you're able to actually invest in your farm, because it's always interesting to hear people talk about farmers with acres or hectares. In Rwanda, we don't even talk about size of farm you have. You say how many trees do you have, because your average Rwandan coffee farmer has 200 trees. So that's a very small space to be operating from. So and it gets really hard to be able to access money to actually invest in that farm, because it's not seen as a great investment. So those are some of the challenges that I've seen and that we experience on a regular basis with the farmers that we work with.
And what are some of the things, Gilbert, that you're doing to tackle that? One or two of the things.
Right. So one of the things that we undertook at our company as KZ Noir was partnering with Rainforest Alliance, where we trained 2,587 farmers in a remote area in Rwanda called Karenjera district in the western part of Rwanda, where with these farmers, they had never been trained on the kind of training that we partnered with Rainforest to do, and that was a very wide range of training around social issues in the community. We looked at the environmental issues within the community. How do you prune your coffee? How do you mulch? How do you focus on the trees that are going to be providing you with more yield? How can you start thinking a little bit outside? Because farmers they've been farming for a long time, so they know what they're doing. But things and space has changed over time, so the need to start thinking in a different way. So for example, fertilizer. The government of Rwanda subsidizes fertilizer, but then we've got coffee pulp. So how can we use the coffee pulp with new technology to be able to actually start providing fertilizer to the farmers without having to wait for chemical-based fertilizers? And how do you do both? So the opportunity what we've taken on is we are not in a position to change the coffee prices. I mean, hopefully there's work that can be done towards that. But at the very least, if you can't grow your land, the country's not going to grow any bigger. The population is going high. The country isn't getting wider. Then how can you actually increase the yield per tree? So if you were getting 2 kilos of cherries per tree, how can you get that to 4 kilos, and how can you get it to 5 kilos? And that can potentially get you to a point where you're making more. And so those are some of the things that we engage the farmers with to start looking at the way that we start to become the change that we want to see within the communities that we're operating in.
Thank you, Gilbert. So Christine, Dunkin' Donuts, why are you involved in sourcing sustainably, and where do you see any barriers in terms of engaging mainstream consumers around sustainability?
Sure, we do. So let me set a little bit of context about who we are as a company in about 2 seconds, which is Dunkin' Brands is the parent company. We own both Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin-Robbins. So when we look at who our consumers are and the range of products that we source, it spans not just coffee and cocoa, but also dairy for both Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin-Robbins. And we have to look at both of those consumers. But it's important for us, and where I stand, and Tensie talked about a journey of sustainability. I started Dunkin' 5 years ago, and we've really been on that journey for probably about 5 years. So we're relatively new to this, but it is really important to us. And one of the primary reasons that we look at sustainability and sourcing is to ensure that we have a sustainable supply of all of those commodities moving forward, for the very reasons that Kip and Gilbert have talked about, is that and Tensie earlier, that they really are at risk. And we want to make sure that we can serve a great cup of coffee that hopefully you all enjoyed this morning for several years to come, and that's going to be affordable and both available in the quantity that we need as we grow as a company. And I think the biggest barrier for us in terms of the mainstream consumer is that the mainstream consumer really isn't asking for this product, at least not ours. So our guests don't go into their local Dunkin' Donuts or their local Baskin-Robbins and say, do you have certified product? Can you tell me where your product comes from? I'm not sure most of them could answer that question themselves, and I'm certain that our crew members couldn't. So it's hard to make a case to our franchisees, and that's the other point to add here, is that we are 99% franchise-owned, which means we are a collection of small business owners who all care very much about what their profits are year over year, because they're small business owners. So, they're great folks and they care about the environment, but at the end of the day, they have to pay their bills and they have to support their families. And so if most of the certified products do come with a premium, the consumer isn't asking for it, and most often, even if they say they want it, they're not that willing to pay for that premium. And so we can't really pass that cost on, and that means asking our small business owners to incur that cost, and it's hard to make that business case when the consumer isn't demanding it. So I think the biggest challenge for us right now is that the mainstream consumer is not demanding this product at the level that we need them to in order to, and oftentimes, make the business case that this is a sales driving. We still find a way to make that business case, but consumer demand isn't the case that we can use right now.
Thank you. Kip, you alluded earlier to your work and a bit in trying to how the industry itself broadly is changing. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you can use your role as Blommer in helping to shift that and what you've been doing there, but what you see as the trends and where you see things going?
Yeah. Many of you may have seen over the past few years the major brands in chocolate, Mars, Mondelez, Nestle, Hershey, others, have really kind of made a claim that they are going to go fully sustainable and or certified with their supply chain in cocoa most targets are by 2020. And for those companies who we work with, it's a fairly easy conversation in trying to build those supply chains. But the real challenge is when you get outside of those true confectionery companies. General Mills has stated that they're going to have fully sustainable cocoa also by 2020. Kellogg, Cliff Bar. Those are the companies that are really buying chocolate as an ingredient. They've got a whole portfolio, Dunkin' Donuts, a whole portfolio of things that they're purchasing. So for us to come in and with our footprint and partnerships on the ground, we can provide a solution for them. They don't have the teams or resources on the ground. They are buying a whole basket of commodities, and quite honestly, cocoa is generally a relatively small piece of their overall book. So what we do is we leverage our size in bringing to those customers a viable solution that will help to satisfy their corporate goals and philosophy.
Thank you. So Gilbert, you talked a bit about the smallholders. Can you talk to us a bit about your conversations with them? What their, how this work is changing their lives, their perspectives, how else consumers and people can help with that? How can we all, provide a better life for them? What else can be done?
Thank you. So to be able to really talk about the experiences of the farmers and what they're going through, one of the biggest impact that we're seeing is a small, very early steps of just a mind shift in the smallholder farmers and how they're thinking about things. Keeping in mind that, my company works with, about 10 to 15,000 farmers all across the country. And these are farmers who are literally living at the bottom of the pyramid. And so these are populations that aren't thinking 2-3 years from now. These are populations that are thinking next week, next month, at most. So it's already a very tough discussion or communicating, we need to think about this on the long term when somebody's really thinking about tomorrow. And so one of the impact is starting to see farmers get excited about the training on what could change within their farms or within their practices. So it's a very small step in seeing somebody starting to think, okay, so there is possibility to do this longer and do it better because for a company like ours, we're there to stay. We've been there 4 years, and we did it 2013, we were there 2014, and we're saying we're here and we're going to continue thinking and working towards that. So I think that's one impact that we're seeing. The other impact that we're seeing is when people are able to, for example, just the fact that the workers within our washing stations who are during the season employees, starting to see that health and safety is something that is important. So we're changing how people value themselves and value the companies that they work with, because other washing stations that are close by don't have some of the safety measures. And so what you've done is you've now have an employee who is now starting to see a right that they have as the employee. So if they ever left our company and went to work for competition, they'll start demanding that at that next washing station. So you're starting to create a momentum of informed smallholder farmers who are also smallholder employees of some of these smaller units that we have across. So I think the collection and the understanding and the knowledge is really what's becoming very, very key, and people starting to obviously, based on wastewater management treatments, for example, that we've built with the farmers. So that's becoming something that's, it's a no-brainer. It's actually creating a much better space and a much better environment for the population that are living within that community. And so those are impacts that we're seeing. I can go on, but yeah.
You can give us one more if you want.
One more that's not necessarily smallholder focused, but we as a company and the staff that I have, having to, hearing Kip talk about what you guys did 15 years ago. So I've been running this company for 5 years and did coffee even before. And thinking that we actually now have to create a sustainability department within our office and within our company and start thinking about those things. And I think, so the effect becomes much bigger, because before we even engage smallholder farmers as the farmer partners, it's engaging ourselves and asking ourselves some of the things that we need to do. So that's another impact that I have to walk with and I need to think about, and how do I translate that with the rest of my team, and how do we question ourselves, and how do I go to our board and say, you actually need to make this investment that isn't going to yield in the short term. So I think that's another impact that I think a lot of times we want to think a little bit more on the smallholder, which is important. But before we even do that, the partners that are going out to meet with the smallholder farmers, which is ourselves and our team, also getting impacted.
Thank you. Christine, you mentioned that at the moment the mainstream consumer isn't asking for this, right? So what do you see as the future for retailers like Dunkin' Donuts or McDonald's or others if the mainstream consumer isn't asking? Will this continue despite that? Is there a role that Dunkin' Donuts can play in educating and engaging consumers? How do you see wrestling with that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's two things. Yes, I think that the mainstream consumer will continue to ask, will start to ask for that. We have already seen consumers asking, what's in the food that they're eating, where is that sourced? Is it locally sourced? So I think, hopefully, at least it would be beneficial for me if consumers did start to look at, long term, where does that come from? Not just does it come from my own, within the proximity of where I'm purchasing it, but when it doesn't, what does that look like, and what kind of work is happening on the ground to ensure that this is sustainable and it's going to contribute both to the overall environmental and social impacts globally, but in that community as well. And so I think that I'm hoping that eventually we will get there, because that certainly makes my job a lot easier. But in the absence of that, what we'll continue to do is continue to work behind the scenes with our team to say, okay, this is important to us in terms of ensuring the long-term sustainable supply of this particular commodity, whether it's coffee, cocoa, vanilla, sugar, whatever. We'll continue to work on that end, and we'll continue to get that certification out there where we can. We'll continue to tell that story of how we're sourcing this product sustainably to help raise awareness among the consumer that, yes, it is important where that product comes from. It is important how we source that product, both from everything that Tensie said earlier in terms of how it's grown, how it's transported, the product in which the material and packaging in which that product is served to you, and then how we're able to support efforts for you to dispose of that properly. So we do take that full life cycle approach, and we're going to continue to tell that story to the consumer, and hopefully they're going to start to ask us those harder questions and help us make a stronger business case for it.
And if the consumers don't ask, we'll just stop producing it.
Yeah. Yeah, if we could
then the
increase
consumers can start
the
saying,
available supply.
"Where was that great coffee that you guys used to give us?"
Yeah, exactly.
Or, you could also just all of it could just be sustainable.
Right.
And then it would just all be available on the marketplace, which would be great too.
Exactly. Good. Well, I want to open it up to questions from the audience here. Yes. And please identify yourself and tell us who you're addressing your question to, if there's somebody in particular.
Okay. My name is Ron Berenbeim. I'm adjunct member of the Stern faculty, and I'm addressing this question to the entire panel. So one of the major problems or barriers to sustainability is not something I've heard about in these presentations, and that is corruption. So I would like to know examples of how it occurs in your particular businesses and what your companies or organizations may be doing to combat it. And secondly, in a related question, I would like to know examples or ideas you have on social reporting and transparency with respect to sustainability issues.
Who would like to tackle that?
I'll venture out there first. That's an excellent question. For cocoa, we are working in developing countries, and unfortunately, there are instances where you can look at and the business transacted is not necessarily always done in the most ethical manner. What Blommer has done is really worked up the supply chain. So we have partners that are engaging directly with the farmers, directly with the cooperatives, and we control that supply chain from that farm all the way through here to the U.S. to our factories. We have not only our certifying partners like Tensie with Rainforest Alliance, but we also have independent auditors going in and making sure that everything is being done in the proper manner. Your question on social reporting and the like, I think, and just to kind of follow up on Christine's comments earlier, I think, and if I'm understanding correctly, it's your generation that's really going to drive this. It's not mine. We're kind of getting in this kind of at the tail end. But your ability to communicate through your social media and quickly create a buzz about what company is doing the right thing or, unfortunately, not doing the right thing will really help to drive a lot of this consumer awareness and demand and result in our companies responding to you. Is that what you were referring to in the social?
Well, yes, to some degree. Whoops. Yes, to some degree, but it's also the case that that many companies now are issuing either triple bottom line statements or standalone social performance statements, and there are various protocols for this, the United Nations, Transparency International, and so on. So that's more what I had in mind.
Then just to speak for Blommer, we do not necessarily break out what we're doing on a sustainability basis on any of our P&Ls or anything in that regard. We do make available our programs and networks, and we, as I mentioned, they are audited to make sure that the monies are actually traveling to and being received by the appropriate parties.
Anybody else want to, Gilbert, do you want to?
Yeah, so for corruption, we're very lucky in Rwanda that the corruption level in Rwanda is extremely low. I always make a joke that I've been living in Rwanda for 8 years, and the only time I've ever had to pay a bribe was in a neighboring country. And doing business.
I can attest to the likelihood of that being the case, actually, since I've done a fair amount of work in Africa.
Mm-hmm. And so we've been really lucky to be able to have not be an issue. If anything, if that came up as an issue, there's a lot of support to get that done. But I think in the case of, let's say, sustainability or certifications, it's third party. So for example, the folks that come out to certify us aren't from Rwanda, and so they're not a part of the chain, so to speak, within the communities that we operate in, and I think that helps in minimizing that. So it hasn't been an issue. We don't foresee it to be an issue. As far as reporting, for us and for the past few years, I've actually wanted us not to even think about it, because I wanted us to do this work because we believed in it and it was what we needed to do. And I think when you start putting a lot of emphasis, and it has value and it has importance to report some of these things. But for us, our staff went out and trained farmers off season, and we never documented that we went out and trained 10,000 farmers or 4,000 or 200, because it was what we needed to do. It was what we believed was right to do. And I think when you start pushing for reporting some of these things, then people start to change how they're doing. And so for me, I needed us to have a foundation of doing this because it's a part of who we are as a company and we think it's important. Then naturally having to report these things will come in. So for example, we've just done a development impact study on our company to just see, are we actually reaching some impact, and what are the gaps, what can we do? And as we grow, that starts to become a part of the discussion and what we'll need to do. But currently within our company, we have not started actually documenting in greater detail some of these things, besides maybe, if we're going to have people certified, then we have to train a certain number of people and we have to show who it is that we trained and that we work with. But it hasn't been a big part of our company to say, these are the targets that we have for now.
Yeah, I can take the reporting question, because we do report in the traditional way that you're talking about. Every 2 years we issued our first corporate social responsibility report. In 2010, we're about to issue our third report this spring. And what I found in the value of this, and we have not integrated that with our financial reporting. I don't see that in the foreseeable future. We do report against the Global Reporting Initiative. And the value that I see is it really does allow us to be accountable both internally and externally to the goals that we set, to the progress that we're making. So what I do is on a quarterly basis, I meet with our leadership team and say, here's where we are against these objectives, these goals that we set. Here's what I think we're going to hit. Here's where I don't think we have enough resources. And it allows us to get attention on those issues that might otherwise be pushed aside for issues that may be more sales driving, may be more of interest to our guests, where some of this is behind the scenes, things that don't really impact some of our public-facing sales driving opportunities. But it does allow us to continue to get that message out there. It allows us to continue to ensure that those are given the due diligence that they need. So I think it's as much of a tool internally, but it also allows us to say, hey, here's where we are. We're not going to hide it. We're going to be honest. If you have a question about, what our energy use is, what our commitments are from a nutrition standpoint, how much we source, what those key commodities are, it's all right here. If you want to know what we believe to be our most material issues, it's all right here. And so I think that gives you as a consumer the ability to understand how we view our business, what we believe to be the most material issues, and then what we're telling you we're working on, and how we're demonstrating progress against that. So I do think I'm a big believer. I think it's a great way, particularly for consumer-facing companies, to be really accountable to their guest, and also it's a great tool internally to drive change.
I think I should.
Can I just comment on that answer? That I think that the discipline of collecting the data is about 70 to 80%.
Yeah, I would agree.
Sorry.
Thank you. No problem. And also the certification, just so you know, about 40% of it is social. So we're looking at compliance with ILO conventions, for example, right to organize, labor issues, child labor. So we're looking at that on an annual basis in the supply chains where there is a certification. So that's another element of social impact reporting. In the back there.
How you doing? I'm a junior at Stern. My question is for you, actually. What percent of the coffee bag has to be of sustainably made coffee beans in order to receive the Rainforest Alliance seal?
I think the question was what percentage of the coffee needs to be Rainforest Alliance in order to get the seal. It has to be a minimum of 30%, and then the company has to put that on the pack, that it's 30% or 50% or whatever it is, and that they also have to make a commitment to move towards 100% over time.
So in theory, 70% of the coffee beans can be from potentially corrupt or questionable.
Yes, so we're absolutely. And the reason why we do that is because when you're working with coffee farmers, it takes time. So you can't sort of overnight change sustainability, but you need the incentive to be able to grow the demand. So our feeling is as long as there's a commitment to get to the full 100% and there's a time-bound way to do that, then we can work with them on that. And I'm going to, just because there's lots of questions, I'm happy to talk about that more afterwards. Yes?
So sort of going off of your question and your comments about the consumer, I feel like the whole concept of sustainability is something that is kind of being played loose these days, and people don't know what it is. I work in a food space, and people are now B Corp certified. We're getting lots of phone calls about, can I see your sustainability report? No one is actually really knowing what that means. So I guess in regards to the certifications, is there a regulatory body that oversees them? Like, how do we know where the benchmarks really are? Because to your point, it'd be very easy for General Mills to say, oh yeah, we hit these parameters, but if no one is actually setting a set of standards around them, then what does that mean?
So there is, for example, there's an association called ISEAL where Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade, Forest Stewardship Council, et cetera, are members, and within that we set standards for how we should be conducting ourselves, how we do standards development, how we do traceability, et cetera, right? And then ISEAL reviews us. There's also accreditation systems for the actual certification bodies. So in the SAN Rainforest Alliance system, there's an accreditation body that goes out and looks at the quality of the certification body audits. The same with Forest Stewardship Council certification, they have the same in Fair Trade and so on. So there are always, I want to say, There are always going to be problems on any kind of certified farm at any given moment in time. There is never perfection. The thing that you're focused on is ensuring that there isn't consistent imperfection or consistent corruption or any other challenges like that, right? And so that's what you're putting in place to make sure that you can, I don't know if any of you want to talk about the credibility.
I just wanted, the other aspect that I would say is there are quite a few watchdog groups out there. Probably one of the more well-known one is Oxfam. It would be extremely risky for a large brand to kind of greenwash something and claim they were doing something, because they are actively watched. And those organizations have no hesitation to actually broadcast that if they actually think there is something not true being stated.
Greenpeace and others as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
My name is Tyson Focus. I'm a junior at Stern right now, and I have a question for the whole panel. So my team and I were under the International Studies program at Stern, and we're working on a company analysis of the dairy company in Vietnam. And I just wanted to get your perspective. From your experience, what were the best ways in which you evaluated your company's current sustainability practices? And going along that, you mentioned that one of the biggest issues is educating either your consumers, your partners, or your producers on either effective sustainability practices or the value of those. So what were the best ways in which you guys have succeeded in doing so far?
Who'd like to kick off? Christine?
Yeah, sure, I can take that one. I think that you're always evaluating your sustainability practices, right? In a company like ours, we're a global company. There's always going to be more that you uncover and more that you have to look at, particularly if you have limited resources like most companies do. So when we started, we really looked at what exactly, just assessing the whole company, looking at what do we already have in place, what do we know we're already doing. We already had a fair trade espresso line, but we only had one certified product when I started. So how do we then move the needle on certification and taking that to the, if we follow that through, so why should we have more certified product if there is a premium and the consumer isn't demanding it? Well, this is something that is cost of doing business and cost of entry in the coffee industry. So we were a little bit of laggards while we were leaders when we launched that product in 2004. By 2010, we were kind of laggards in that space, and the longer it took, the more it was going to be obvious that we just didn't have that. It was going to become apparent that maybe we didn't have a commitment to this. So I'm pleased to say that in 2014, we launched 6 certified products, including our first ever national launch, Rainforest Alliance Certified Dark Roast, which is now also being launched internationally. So it was really exciting to see us move the needle on that, but it was very much of saying, look, this is why it's important. It is going to help us ensure a sustainable supply of this product over the long term. This is what the competitive space is doing. I think consumers are increasingly interested, even though they're not maybe demanding. There is a growing awareness, particularly among your generation, of what companies are doing and their commitments to ensuring a sustainable supply chain. So you can look at a number of factors to build that business case, and particularly in coffee, that's where we looked at. I mean, there are other factors that you can look at in other commodities or other areas like regulation or shareholder proposals, and those can also help you make a business case.
Thank you. Gilbert or Kip? Yeah.
No, for us, as we actually first of all needed to, before we could evaluate we needed to actually realize that we needed to start evaluating ourselves. So it's really early stages. So for us, the first thing I did is I hired somebody and said, okay, you're the sustainability manager, and so you need to come up with how we evaluate and what does that mean, and what does it mean for us as a company, the partners that we work. So really early stages of collecting all that information so that we can take the small steps. And so initially what the person ended up working on is to get us certified and go through what that process is like, and then come back and say, okay, this is what certification means for a farmer, but some of the questions that they're asking at the farm level are questions that should be asked us at a company level, and then how can we start saying that this is what we need to do if we're going to drive. And we have both Rainforest Alliance certification and fair trade. USA certification. So we've got both standards, and we look at it, and so we're in the process now of just collecting that data and then creating this department, and then come back and say these are the resources that we need to, and that's when I'll go out and see if we can get those resources to actually make this a robust enough department.
And just add one thing, if you're looking at a business model, I mean, in a lot of ways, what we're doing within Blommer, it's project management. I mean, this is not our core business. Sustainability is an integral part of it. We developed a results framework. What do we actually want to see by our activities? And for us, it's not only meeting those customers' demands, but what are we really trying to impact on the ground? So we have a results framework, we have a whole list of key performance indicators, and that's what we audit against on an annual basis to see if, in fact, we are starting to reach the goals or the impact levels that our vision is stating that we need to do.
Yes.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. My microphone says it doesn't work, so I'm going to speak up a little bit. I'm currently doing my master in corporate education. Before moving to New York, I did CSR consulting in Argentina. My question to all of you, I wanted to know if you got the certification the first time you applied, and if not, how did you approach like the second chance?
We got it the first time we applied. Yeah, but Tensie said it. You know, if you went to the farm today, you'll find some issues. If you went to the washing station today, you'll find some issues. And I think, ideally, what's important is knowing that there is a goal and what you'd like to achieve, and that it's a continuous process and progress that you need to be following through. And I've been in a certification prior to that with other certifications, and so the guy I hired also understood that, and so we were in a advanced stage in being able to ascertain that certification, because we've done a lot of our groundwork in getting ourselves prepared to do it. And if they came back and re-audited and we got certified the second year again, so we feel comfortable. But obviously, there is a lot of work that needs to be done to maintain it. I always say it's probably easier to get the certification. What's harder is to maintain that certification, because people relax and so you become a little bit more confident that you have it and lose ground. And so I think it's always more important to work on maintaining that certification. Is where the
Kip, in your experience working with a variety of different producers, you've seen both them fail and go through.
The Blommer has their own core. Sustainable Origins is our program. And that's, as I mentioned, we started about 15 years ago. So really, in all of the cases with Rainforest Alliance, we've been able to get certified the first time around because we were building on a core program that was already in existence. Where situations where there have been failures, is a lot of times companies or organizations that are not, they're really just trying to get that certification as their first step and haven't done a lot of the work ahead of time, and that's the risk. But I completely agree with Gilbert. It's one thing to get that certification. It's a whole other thing to continue to maintain that and year after year.
Yes.
Hi, I'm an undergraduate student in software at Stern. I think my question is probably most appropriate for Mr. Gatali. I'm very interested in your experience with smallholder farmers that you spoke about. One of the things you mentioned was the need for financing innovation. And so I was just wondering, the innovation that you're looking for there, what kind of, what can you really leverage in terms of what these farmers have, what sort of infrastructure there is in the country, what kind of partnerships can you foresee being made in order to really enable some financing to come through to make sure that the sustainability that they want to achieve with the yields that they want to improve really happen?
Wow. I was hoping to give that to the Stern Business School so they can come back and do a case study and then do some work with us in solving that problem, because that is the $1 million question. So for us as a company, what we've started doing, and this came out even before, but more so apparent when we did our impact development study within our company. There's one thing that we're not leveraging, and so our company works with over 10,000 farmers. We're buying cherries from them, for 3-4 months out of the year. And so an experience like what we had with Rainforest Alliance, where we actually had to engage 2,587 farmers training for a few weeks, meant we needed to actually know who they are, where they live, how big is their family. And so what we've started doing right now, we're doing 2 projects. The first project is called Know Your Farmer. And so Know Your Farmer is a project that we've started. We've now, besides the ones that were certified, for our other portfolio companies, we've registered over 1,000 farmers now with a small tablet. And we go and talk to a farmer and ask them questions about who they are, where they live, how many children, how big is their farm. So collect that database, first of all, so we can understand who that farmer is. And the next step for us is that database. So what we have, for example, as a company is, that's a database that we would have, and we would know this person produces this much coffee because they deliver to our washing station. And 3 years from now, we can see a trend. Have they been delivering the same quantity? Has it changed, going up or going down? Then we've got the washing stations, which are assets that are in these remote areas that we operate in. And washing stations operate 4 months out of the year, 5 months at most. And the infrastructure is there. So it's a space. We've got full-time staff that are there. And so ideally what we would like to see is, how do we now bridge the gap that we as a company have invested in getting the database? We've got some staff, but we're not a financing agency. We don't do microcredit loans. That'll take us completely out of the core of what we do as a business. But how can we now start engaging another company that does this as a business? If they're doing microcredit, so we can come to them and say, we already have a database. So your risk management program is decreased to this level, because I can tell you that this is James and this is Mrekatete and this is Musabe. They've been giving us coffee for the past 3 years worth $100 every year. This is how great their farm is because they're certified and we've trained them. And so this is a database that we've created for you. So if you are willing to loan money to this population or this person, then we can potentially provide a guarantee if they deliver that coffee to our washing station. And instead of paying $100 to that farmer, we can pay $80 to the farmer and $20 to you, the finance. And I think those are the steps that we need to start thinking about, because there are a lot of islands, so we're doing our production. I'm looking to export coffee and sell it. And then you've got financing companies on this end, trying to find people they can finance. And so how do we start collaborating? And so those are some of the things that we're looking at doing as a company, but it's a big undertaking that will take some time, but slowly. That's one way. Very open to people who would like to take this on and think a little bit more about it. And because eventually that's what we'll need. And that's not just the smallholder farmer. I know your question is a smallholder farmer, but how do we do it as a company? If I want to get certified, our washing station has to get a wastewater treatment. And the working capital financing that we get is only for 12 months. After I sell coffee, I got to pay back the loans. And if I went back to one of our financiers and said, well, I was just really looking to do a wastewater plant. Can you advance me some money? Things start to change. They're not necessarily, there are no long-term loans for sustainability programs. So if we can't even get it as a company that is established and has audited accounts, imagine what it's like for a smallholder farmer. And so it's got to be done on both ends.
And Gilbert, you teed it up perfectly for the panel we're going to hear from next around financing in the supply chain and for suppliers and how one might begin to work on that. And also, I think one of the things that's interesting about Gilbert is saying is that he is approaching this all as an ecosystem, right? Where he needs to bring all these different pieces together and to make the whole thing work. And that requires a whole new set of skills and partnerships to be able to get it done, which means that the world of business is a lot more complicated than it used to be, right? But you see 3 practitioners here, and we've heard from them who are really expert at navigating that. So we now have our break, and is it back in the back in the room, or no?
I think the coffee is over in the front lounge here, I believe.
Okay.
Right, and we have about 15 minutes or so for a break.
Great.
But our thanks is extraordinary.
Yes.